Is 2024 the end? We're talking a possible third war, turmoil in the royal palace, and the coming of an apocalyptic comet that's just a couple months away. If even one of these predictions on the list comes to pass, it certainly could mean the end of the world. So in just a couple months, a comet will be passing Earth, the Devil Comet. And just to start things off on an ominous note, one of Nostradamus' passages states, "There will come a horrible slaughter of people and animals. At once we will see vengeance, 100 hands, thirst, famine, when the comet will pass." So what is this supposed comet? Well, all this stuff is open very heavily to interpretation, of course, but seeing as the Pons-Brooks Comet, ominously nicknamed the Devil Comet, will be passing Earth for the first time in over 70 years in June, who knows, maybe this summer will be full of slaughter, vengeance, hunger, thirst, and a bunch of hands, I guess. As for why all this chaos erupts, it won't have anything to do with the comet itself. We'll be able to see it pass us by, but it's nowhere close enough to cause any harm. We'll need telescopes to actually see it. So it seems like all the death and famine is going to be caused by something else. And hey, you're in luck, because I have 9 possible causes for disaster coming your way. Through the death of a very old pontiff, a Roman of good age will be elected. Of him it will be said that he weakens his see, but long will he sit and in biting activity. That passage from Nostradamus has led interpreters to believe a new pope will be taking over in 2024. Pope Francis has been having some health issues as of late, and he is 87, so it wouldn't really be that surprising. Now, a pope of good age, that doesn't sound too bad. A young, hip pope, chews gum, wears sunglasses, says some sick slang. You know, that's what cool young people do, right? Could be good to have a pope of good age, but the weakens his see part doesn't sound very promising. I don't really know what the hell weakens his see means. Does it mean the guy's gonna go blind, lose his vision? Does it just vaguely mean he's gonna suck? Well, either way, it doesn't sound good, and the long sitting and biting activity part seems to mean he's gonna be the pope for a long time. As for what biting activity means, well, I think this new pope is gonna be a vampire. He'll just enjoy the activity of biting people. Let's talk about the Great Naval Battle. Nostradamus wrote that a, quote, red adversary will become pale with fear, putting the great ocean in dread. What does he mean by this red adversary? Well, a lot of followers of Nostradamus' writings have interpreted this to mean China, mainly because of the country's increasing tensions with Taiwan. Perhaps the seer foresaw a naval battle between China and Taiwan, and it's hard not to imagine other countries joining in on the party. Maybe this naval battle will turn into a full-on war, a world war perhaps? More on that in a bit. The Great Ocean becoming a battlefield may not be the sole cause of the end of the world, but it might kick things off. Of course, there are other possibilities as well, like turmoil in the royal palace. Nostradamus also refers to the King of the Isles being, quote, driven out by force, and that a new king shall be anointed who for a long time will appease the earth. Now, appease the earth? I mean, that sounds nice, right? I think the earth is due for some appeasing. Well, hold your horses, because apparently this new king won't be coming along until after a war. How long will this war last? I don't know. I don't have fancy superpowers like Nostradamus. I'm just a regular old Joe. As for what the war is, though, well, perhaps it's part of the whole China-Taiwan thing. Maybe it's an entirely different war altogether. Main reason people have been bringing up this specific passage lately, though, is because we haven't had a king on the British throne for a long time, and with King Charles's old age combined with some of the health problems he's had as of late, it seems like there's a good chance he may not be on the throne for very long. As for the driven out by force part, will he step down just not being able to do the task anymore? Will an invading force seize power in Britain? We'll just have to wait and see. Here's something else to look forward to. Nostradamus also predicted an increase in climate disasters for 2024, with one passage stating, "The dry earth will grow more parched, and there will be great floods when it's seen. So that's really great. There have been more heat waves in recent years. Whether you subscribe to global warming or not, it is pretty clear that Earth is now warmer than it has been in the past, which has led some interpreters to see that Earth will grow more parched line as, well, the Earth drying out. Lots of ice melting and huge floods swallowing up large chunks of land, leading to, of course, more chaos, death, and suffering. By the way, folks, what way would you rather the world end? Natural disasters like this, or something more like a zombie apocalypse or a devastating world war? Cast your votes down in the comments. I'll tally them all up, and the winners will receive nothing. Speaking of climate disasters, though, earthquakes also come into play, and some even think that the passage I just mentioned before may have already played out right at the start of this year in Japan, when a huge earthquake rocked the western coastline on New Year's. Hundreds of people lost their lives, homes were destroyed, there was also a tsunami, a massive fire in Majima City that took even more lives, and people were crammed into shelters where the chances of sickness spreading was highly increased. In the early days of the disaster, food and water supplies were also short. Awful. And being in that situation, something I wouldn't wish on anyone, must have felt like the end of the world, but I do find it pretty silly that some people are connecting a disaster that happened in Japan in 2024 to a prophecy written by a man in the 1500s. I mean, it's not like this was the only awful disaster that happened in the 500 plus years since the guy was alive. Maybe Nostradamus was foreseeing a far worse calamity that's still yet to happen. Maybe he saw into a future disaster that already happened closer to when he was alive, or people are just reading too much into things. What do you think? Share those thoughts. Again, in line with natural disasters, this could be connected to the famine the seer predicted for the future, writing of a, quote, very great famine through pestiferous wave. Could this be referring to tsunamis wreaking havoc on agriculture and causing starvation? I say that because of the wave part, but pestiferous, I mean, that could also mean the famine might be caused by some sort of sickly thing that causes crops to decay and die. Not exactly sure what this would be. Maybe some form of gas used in one of the wars I mentioned before, toxic radiation in the atmosphere or something. Or maybe it's more biblical, like an apocalyptic swarm of locusts that damages all the crops. Point is, I've brought up famine a couple times on this list now, so if folks really are right in their approximations about the timeline of these predictions, we're in for some grumbling stomachs in the very near future. Hoard all the canned beans and Pop-Tarts you can while you still have a chance. Alright, I mentioned a third world war earlier, so I gotta deliver. Yes, another fun one. Nostradamus foresaw a third world war breaking out 79 years after the second one. And for those of you who didn't pay attention in history class, World War II wrapped up in 1945, meaning 2024 is the year this third war in the trilogy is supposed to release. Well, will we recover from this one? Will we come out of it stronger and more unified as a species? Will good triumph over evil? It's hard to say. The third in the trilogy is usually when things drop in quality. They jump the shark and they just plain suck, right? Terminator is a classic. Terminator 2, one of the best action movies ever made. Terminator 3, we don't talk about that one. I bet some of you were probably just like, Terminator 3, oh, Terminator 3, you didn't even remember that movie existed probably. Mad Max, awesome. Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior, one of the best action movies ever made. So maybe instead of good triumphing over evil, World War III will be the one that finally does us in. Nostradamus warned of a, quote, celestial fire when the lights of Mars will go out, end quote. Now, what does the destruction of Mars have to do with Earth? Well, it's possible that the passage isn't referring to the destruction of Mars itself, but maybe a failed mission to Mars. But now we've all heard of Elon Musk's SpaceX mission to Mars set to launch in the very near future, but there are also two California-based companies, Relativity Space and Impulse Space, who are apparently teaming up to launch a mission to the Red Planet as early as this year. I'm not entirely convinced, but if that does happen, things may not go very smoothly. And I mean, like, forget Nostradamus' ominous mention of Mars. A manned trip to Mars in 2024 is almost certain to fail, right? I mean, I don't gotta be clairvoyant to guess that. We haven't even set foot on the moon since Apollo 17 in 1972. Now, granted, it's not like there's much going on the moon. We went, we walked around a bit. Well, what's left to do? But the point is, the practice just isn't there. Finally though, we have the most ominous sounding passage on the list. The Antichrist very soon annihilates the three. 27 years his war will last. The unbelievers are dead, captive, exiled, with BLOOD, human bodies, water, and red hail covering the earth. Now, if that doesn't sound like the end of the world, then I don't know what does. I guess the 27 years thing kinda answers the question of how long the war will last though. Now, what is the Antichrist really referring to here? Does it literally mean Satan is gonna rise up from the pits of hell and unleash a war between demon and man right here on Earth? Honestly, if the world is gonna end, I think that would be the climax of all climaxes. Better to burn out than to fade away, right? Well, on that note, I've been your host James, and I'll catch you, yes you specifically, in the next video.